A very good afternoon to you and welcome to this very important session. I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists, if I may, before we set out the terms of engagement, so to speak. Stephen Phipson, no stranger to any of us here, Chief Executive of Make UK. Welcome, Stephen. Mike Loughran, who's CTO of UK and Ireland, Rockwell Automation. Mike, hello to you. Emmanuel Camus, Senior Vice President, Strategic Alliances, EMEAI at PTC. Hello, Emmanuel. Sam Turner, Chief Technology Officer at the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. Sam, long time no see, welcome to you. Philippa Glover, Managing Director of CNC Robotics up there in Liverpool. Great to see you, Philippa. And Donna Edwards, Managing Director of the Growth Company, which of course runs the Made Smarter program, which is very, very germane to what we're going to be talking about. Now, obviously, we're going to be using that phrase digital technologies a lot today. The pandemic has forced us all into accelerating our uptake of digital technologies. Yes, what we're doing right now is evidence of that. The fact that people are now talking via Zoom, Teams, whatever, when they just used to pick up the phone or more importantly, meet in person. But of course, digital technologies mean so much more. I've been doing quite a bit of work with a company in the Southwest that adopted an e-commerce solution. That is a digital technology, and it built a whole new business stream for them that increased their resilience and, of course, increased their profitability and productivity. And then there's the whole manufacturing operational element of digital technologies, which anybody in the manufacturing arena, in production lines, connecting your machines, getting data from them, using that data, being able to interpret it and help you make decisions, and of course, connecting you better with your customers. So if I may, I'd like first of all to get a little bit of context, because we have a way of beating ourselves up in this country over not being as advanced in some technologies as others. But perhaps we're right to do so. Sam Turner, perhaps you could give us a little bit of context. Where do we stand when compared with our global competitors when it comes to adopting digital technologies, anything from robotics through automation through digital manufacturing tech?
Okay, Nick. Well, I'm afraid the starting point isn't great. We are way behind all our major industrialized competitors. The install base compared to Germany's way out ahead, but looking at the rest of Europe, the US, Southeast Asia, we are at the back of the pack, really, in terms of industrialized nations. There's some green shoots. We're seeing an increase in investments in digital technologies and robotics in particular. Recent reports showing 5% increase this year. That's still about a tenth of the total investments made in Germany, and whilst we're starting to pick up, those who are way ahead of us are still investing at greater speed and greater rates. So we're magnitudes behind our industrialized nations. We've seen barriers have been understood to be a lack of confidence perhaps in the market, a lack of clarity on where to go for trusted partners, concerns about skills, concerns about cybersecurity. And it seems that for a long time, UK businesses have perhaps seen a more obvious downside and less obvious upside. I think that's starting to change now with what we've seen in the last 12 months. We are seeing companies starting to invest in digitalization and automation as a means of dealing with the challenge we've faced in the last 12 months, trying to get facilities back up to rate, dealing with COVID restrictions and uncertainty and operating at improving productivity. And also the need to be flexible, I think. So it's maybe positioning into new markets, new product lines, changing rates. So we're seeing that investment up to now, maybe the motivation incentive is increasing. I think it's a job as a community to make sure we remove the barriers so we can start to accelerate from the position that we're at now.
Stephen, obviously, given the pandemic, of course, and Brexit, and we still don't know what shape that's going to take, it really is very important for our sector to be as competitive as possible on the world stage. That adds a huge amount of urgency to the issue, does it not?
Yes, it does, Nick, and it's really good to be able to speak about this issue on this webinar today. So clearly, we as Sam said, we are behind many other countries, and a lot of that has been around technology adoption with our SME community. That's been a real struggle. And we see in the country at the moment a sort of two-tier development of larger companies now accelerating away with their technology adoption around digital technologies, and still a challenge around SMEs. There are some good signs though. So I point to a couple of things. One of the if there is a positive from the pandemic, on our survey results, we now see a much greater awareness of digital technologies and their benefit to 4IR agenda, their contribution to productivity and efficiency, as well as the integrated supply chain and all of the other issues that we know about with digitization. And it's risen up to 90% on our survey results, which last year was around 30%. So using Zoom and using all the sort of digital methods of communication during lockdown has actually heightened that awareness, which is a good thing, because our challenge is around technology adoption. The second point I would highlight is the excellent work done by Donna and Made Smarter up in the pilot in the northwest of the UK under that Made Smarter, and the progress we've made to get more SMEs on that journey is really a great testament, and certainly something that government has taken notice of, Nick. So now we've seen a commitment under the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund for additional funding, and we are pushing now hard to make a national rollout of the Made Smarter initiative so we can get that awareness program out there, and more importantly, take away one of the constraints around investment that Sam spoke about with joint investment alongside what we're doing with Innovate UK there to get people on that journey. I think the last point I would make, and it's again around getting people onto this journey, is around there's a perception issue. There's a perception that it's for big companies, it's a big glass and chrome building, and it's all very expensive, and how can I as an SME get on that journey? And as we know, 95% of manufacturing businesses in this country are SMEs, and the lessons we're learning, particularly from the pilots, is that for very small amounts of money, a few £100s, you can equip your CNC machines with sensors, you can harvest the data, you can double your efficiency or productivity within a month. And there's some really solid case studies now, which really encourages many more of those smaller companies onto that journey. So we have now a situation, Nick, where we've got recognition and support from government. I hope that accelerates, because it's a key agenda item for global Britain, as you spoke about, to be competitive going forwards. And we now have some really good evidence that we can get to those SMEs, and rolling it out on a national program is the next big step in our journey as a country.
Well, Donna Edwards at the Growth Company and the Northwest pilot of Made Smarter, last time you and I were together, we were at a small company in Liverpool, which was taking advantage of the Northwest pilot program, which changed its entire future by adopting these technologies. They were very receptive to the program. How else is it going down? Are people biting your hand off, so to speak, to get access to the assistance you're offering?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a dip, obviously, as the pandemic started, as businesses started to review how they were going to operate, whether they could operate. But demand for the programme is still very strong. And actually, it's the advocacy of those early adopters in the pilot that's starting to engage more SMEs to take that step forward. So demystifying the language. So we don't tend to talk about Industry 4 or technology. We actually talk about what are your business issues and challenges, and what are the problems that you've got, and how can we help you solve those. But one thing the pilot has shown us is companies are a lot further back in that journey than I think we envisaged they might be. They need a lot more support in terms of looking at digital strategy, and data and connectivity is sort of the fundamental building block that they have to get right before they then start to look at technology that might be, you know, a bit more advanced. We're seeing more robotics type activity coming through once they've got the data and connectivity. And the company you referred to in Liverpool didn't know where anything was in their production line. It was in multiple units, nothing was connected at all. And they've increased their productivity by about 70%, and are now a growing business, and entering new sectors and markets because they now have that visibility. So technically they had some good machinery, but none of it was connected, so they'd had to stop taking orders. And we're seeing lots of things like that. But as Stephen says, it's not huge value projects. and some of it's as simple as, you know, very experienced operatives going into retirement. How are they going to replace them? And actually that's where we're starting to see some of the robotic activity and automation come in, that repetitive tasks they can do in a different way, but it's about a journey for them.
Mike Loughran at Rockwell, when you're talking to manufacturers, obviously talking to senior people within companies, you've got to try to get across to them what it's going to take in terms of leadership, building a strategy. What do you say to them when it comes to how you're going to turn your company around and how difficult that might be?
Yeah, and I think it's been touched on by many of the speakers so far, but Donna mentioned it there. It has to be business outcome based. If we talk about technology, senior leadership, their eyes glaze over. They start to fiddle with their iPad, whatever, right? It's just like, yeah, whatever, it's not my problem. If you start to talk about how you can make them more agile, more profitable, and to address their business risks and challenges, then you start to draw out where the digital strategy comes in. And I think this is part of the issue. And again, it was mentioned, we talk around technology, we talk around digital technology strategies. It's really just addressing problems for better outcomes. And if you don't address the right outcomes in the right order, you ain't going to get what you want. So again, as Donna mentioned, we found when we're speaking with companies, large to small, they just don't have the digital backbone in place to even put on a digital supply chain, fully connected environment. It's like, oh, we've got no networks. Oh, no one's talked to us about that. So I think it's really about looking at the holistic approach, but making it business outcome based as well, because that's what grabs people's attention. And you need leadership and sponsorship as part of any digital journey.
Emmanuel, PTC has worked with the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre in Sheffield, Rotherham for some time now, showcasing the connectivity of machines. What kind of evidence is that producing, and how is that able to be transmitted to people watching this webinar who may say, well, I'd like to find out how these things actually work before I think about adopting them?
Yeah, and it's exactly what you say. People need to experiment or to experience these digital technologies on their business. So if you speak about technologies, nobody understands, but if they see the technology applicable to one of the business case or one use case they face, then they switch and they understand. So this is exactly why AMRC and other what we call transformation centers do exist. They bring technologies to manufacturing use cases to have a showcase of what's the business outcome. So what Mike was just saying of technology. Doing technology for technology, it doesn't bring any value. And we are a bit at a stage where we want to end this pilot purgatory. We did many things, but we should start with why are we doing these things? What's the business value? And the recommendation we see is usually it's better to start small, prove a value, scale fast. No way we should work with a 5 years roadmap because technology is moving fast, but really look at why we are doing it. And these centers like AMC are perfect showcase. One of the latest technology that they acquired, and maybe we can speak about it later through the ventilator challenge, is expert capture. So before you expert capture, it's a technology in augmented reality, helping some engineers and technicians to capture what they are doing. So for example, you're a maintenance engineer, you do a maintenance procedure and you capture with HoloLens or augmented reality glasses what you're doing, and then you are able to give it to other people who have not done it. So when you showcase this technology on a use case, you can educate, especially the small and medium business, for which it's not so easy to access to these technologies.
So I think it's really important that SMEs check out what is on offer from places like AMRC, go to the High Value Manufacturing Catapult website, check out AMRC and other centers like MTC and others around the country. There are showcases. You can actually go and see what is in operation. Philippa at CNC Robotics, your company is predicated on it's actually built on adopting all of these digital technologies and making them available to others.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I think echoing the point, I think it's really important that you keep things simple. So you know what we specialise in doing is helping businesses, you know, adopt robotic technology, and predominantly we work with the SME community. And it's just really important to think about what the actual specific manufacturing challenge that you're trying to solve, and work with the right partner to help you break that down into, you know, a realistic plan. And then build on that. So sometimes we do have people that come to us who have got some quite grand ideas in terms of fully automated factories, and that's an absolutely great aspiration from a footprint perspective. But it's really, really important often to break it down and to start simple first, learn with that big aspiration in mind. And you know, I think that's where, you know, there's a number of people on the call today who can help and advise people as to who can support you on that journey.
Yeah, Sam, just to conclude this section of the webinar, it is really about knowing who to talk to, where to go and look at these things in operation, and being able to reach out. And of course, if Made Smarter, fingers crossed, were to be rolled out across the country, that would help enormously. But in the meantime, it really is about knowing who to talk to, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I mean, the work Don and the team are doing in the Northwest is excellent. That's the programme that's really demonstrating progress and driving adoption. We're hoping that rolls out across England. But across the HVM catapult, we've got centres across the whole of the UK. I absolutely support the message we've heard that it's all about focusing on the problems we're trying to solve, not on a technology push. And that's the way we address this across HVM catapult. We're actually launching a series of digital innovation hubs as part of the Made Smarter RCF programme. This is going to be a network of industry, sector focused problems we're solving, addressing with technology solutions. So demonstrators to come and see how a problem like yours in a particular sector or particular manufacturing process is being addressed with a range of suites of digital technologies, and also attracting in new tech companies to bring in new solutions, and a place where you can come and do de-risking projects. So there's great support available from HVM Catapult across the whole of the nation to go out and support businesses, to bring business in to look at some of these physical demonstrators, and also to access these remotely, where we have some constraints on our working environment at the moment. And some great examples we've worked on through the ventilator challenges is remote support, getting businesses, you know, post-COVID reset, restarted. We're seeing a real appetite now, and that again is this sense, a clear sense of what's the problem we're trying to fix. We can then look at the technology and solutions available that can help to address those. But it starts with business need. We've got some really good examples around the network we can help with.
Well, that's a terrific way to sort of wrap up that part of the webinar, which is about really the need, the challenge, the imperative that the UK does actually start to climb up the global table of adoption of these technologies, because there is a huge risk, as always, of being left behind when we're supposed to be competing on the global stage, notwithstanding the brilliant technologies that are being developed already by British manufacturers. Engineering in this country is world class. We just need to find ways to make it as competitive as possible on the world stage. Let's move on to supply chain. I was rather taken aback. A couple of years ago, I spoke to the CEOs of two very large companies, one an OEM and one a tier one, and they made it very clear to me that in future, their supply chain down the chain, their sort of tier 2, 1 providers would have to be digitally connected to them using digital technologies in order to do business with them in future. In other words, this was an imperative that had to take place. Now, I'm not certain whether that makes an awful lot of sense. I'm not certain I quite understood it myself. Sam, I'm going to ask you again to lead off on this, because I think the connected supply chain, the almost three-dimensional supply chain, is something that people really hopefully will get to understand as a result of this conversation.
Yeah, there certainly is. I think there's a general need for a greater interoperability of systems. So the example you're talking about there, the top-down, here's an OEM solution, everybody must follow it, can appear to become a tax, a cost of doing business, rather than a value add. And we're trying to move towards platforms, and there's those around us here. Clearly, you can help with solutions that can be accessible and deployable at different levels in the supply chain. So a key thing is visibility and sharing data. We've got some challenges around how do we reset that relationship through the supply chain. So looking at supply chain as a connected set of partners, not just the normal commercial procurement deal. So you're actually getting greater value. You can offer greater value as a supply chain company to your customers. But this thing, Mike touched on as well around the need for some kind of digital backbone is important, I think. Then you can actually start to not only have an understanding of what's happening within your own organization, to have greater confidence to make decisions, to improve productivity, reduce lead times, but also be able to share some of that data with your customers and suppliers. So interoperability, be able to exchange and translate data between different companies and supply chain is really important. I think whilst we're trying to build those standards that become norms across the sector, as an individual company, think about how you can interface and share data, access data from your suppliers, demand signals from your customers, but also share your own data to give confidence and create a competitive advantage, both on your productivity and responsiveness. So yeah, I think more agile supply chains will come from this greater data sharing.
Emmanuel, obviously what you do at PTC is you're very much about extracting data from machines and connecting them all together to produce the whole picture. But in terms of plugging into supply chains, do you find any resistance amongst the companies you work with to sharing data, or do they see that there is a real value-added advantage to doing so?
To be honest, when we look at what happened for the past months, and I guess we've got both the pandemic and maybe the Brexit in UK, we have an obligation to disrupt the way the supply chain are organizing. We even speak about reshoring. So if we address the issue with the why we need to do it, it works pretty well. We've seen during this pandemic time acceleration of usage of SaaS solutions, for example. So I'm behind the IoT and getting access to data, but the ability to access to new capabilities without any capital investments, secure in a secure way, and to have quick access to capabilities is also something that people are looking at. In the pandemic, we've seen an acceleration of the use of a SaaS solution we have called Onshape, which is a CAD SaaS solution, because usually the design engineers they work at the office on a pretty heavy workstations, and now they had to stay at home. So having the ability to do their job remotely on a SaaS secure solution, I guess it's also something which is changing. So if we start with the why and the business value, usually the behaviors follow, and we can speak a bit more about what we see in terms of awareness education we need to do for the people later if you wish.
Mike at Rockwell, is this an issue that you find that companies have to adjust their thinking when it comes to sharing data across supply chains? Is this something you come across?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it was for lack of want. I think it was the barriers that were perceived that got in the way. And we mentioned about the larger companies saying you must have, you must be able to fit into my digital supply chain, and people's eyes going, oh my word, I can't afford a full ERP, etc., etc. And this is where technology has really become a leveler and an enabler, because actually, by partnering with people to create this digital backbone, you actually can build very quickly, easily, scalable, and relatively cheaply a secure digital backbone that helps you link. And if you look at the partnership between Rockwell, PTC, and Microsoft, we can now enable any company to be able to go from shop floor to enterprise with a full connected system in between, and deploy on the cloud if they want to, and link to other people, all within a secure environment. And you can pay for it as you use it. You don't need to have IT skills. You don't need to have a server farm. You can buy that as a service, expand it as you will, add things to it. It's future ready. And I think that's the piece that has really changed the game. And if you look at some of the companies who've done so well in the last 6 months, they've kind of taken off the shelf technology and molded it to make sure that they're connecting with their customers in the manner the customer wants now, in a very rapid way. They've not waited and designed it. They've went, right, I can use Facebook as a menu. I can use FaceTime to support people remotely. I can use desktop commissioning. All these great things. They've just went, yeah, let's quickly. They've been very innovative. And that's what we need to be, innovative, but it needs to scale with you. So the partnership bit is absolutely core on that.
I just want to follow up, Mike, with you. You used the word secure there. I know that some companies have in the past said, well, if I open up my data, I have an open supply chain communication with everybody up and down, they're going to see things I don't want them to see. That's not the case, is it? I mean, you can be absolutely clear about what you want to keep private and what you want to share.
And that's absolutely correct, Nick. And this is the bit where the partnership comes in, because you can leverage other companies' fantastic secure infrastructure and knowledge to just enable those bits that you want to. So, we talk about, people talk about the cloud a lot, but one of the things you can do, you can open up a one-way connection and just let your customers access one part of that and completely hive off your IP. So you only share what you need to, they only take what they want to. And that is a win-win situation, right? And it also cuts down everyone's overhead.
Philippa, as somebody on the ground at the sharp end of manufacturing, how much do you is your supply chain visible to your customers and your suppliers?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think we're a relatively small company, so we've got good visibility of our supply chain. Whether it's as digitally connected as it could be, absolutely not. We're on the same journey as everyone else. Yes, we're a robotics company and we're very good at that piece, but we're still defining our digital backbone. And I've done an awful lot of work over the period of time to start that journey. But there is more to be done in that next step around the supply chain piece. As a business, we started very much with our accounting and our commercial function, and we digitalized that, and that's been proven dividends. Actually, it's proven dividends throughout the pandemic. And the next bit for us is to then start to look at that next piece in terms of ERP, shop floor, management, and connected to that supply chain. And I think it's it is tough when you're on the coalface and you're dealing with the challenges of wearing multiple hats. So yes, I'm the MD, but I am also HR, health and safety, sales director, and probably everything in between. But by being engaged in the conversations and looking out there for user case studies, we've been able to identify opportunities that are right for our business that we can also share with our supply chain that can help us move forward and grow and scale as a business.
Donna, I wonder, I'm sure it does, when we're talking about the connected supply chain, of course, what it does is enable a real expansion of business revenue streams through things like offering a servitized product. Is this one of the benefits when you're talking to people in the Northwest Pilot, to the companies that you're working with, that they can actually not just benefit their current business, but they can build whole new revenue streams out of being more connected?
Yes, and I mean, that's an aspiration for a lot of companies, depending where they are on that journey. Particular supply chains, we've had companies that we've worked with where they potentially could win new business, couldn't because they weren't going to have the connectivity that was required. So there were business critical reasons why they had to undertake that piece of work. And some good outcomes from that where they've secured business, which now has entered them into new sectors that they weren't working in before. But the bigger challenge is that connectivity internally in terms of where you are in your process and delivering those orders. So they look very insular at the start, but most of them have an aspiration that their customers can connect to them and see where their orders are up to. And equally, some of the supply chains they want to go in, it's mandatory to do that. So, but we've seen some good servitization in terms of, because they've now got that connectivity, they don't actually have to go out and monitor things. They can monitor remotely, so it's reduced travel time. They can spend more time winning more business. So it's small steps for a lot of them, but actually we are seeing some different business models emerging now.
Stephen, talking at the macro level about supply chains, I mean, obviously the pandemic has brought sharply into focus the length and fragility of some of the supply chains we've been used to. Do you foresee the reshoring that is very much the buzzword at the moment? Do you see the reshoring of the UK supply chain coming through as a reality?
I think it's interesting. We've been recently having some group sessions with chief execs of the larger manufacturing groups, just to see what's on their mind strategically as a kind of outcome from what they've experienced during the pandemic. And I think the word that comes across most commonly is about resilience. They've learned the lesson of resilience. We went down a path a few years ago, in the last decade probably, of outsourcing to the best, the cheapest, and it doesn't matter which side of the planet it was on, and the logistics are really good and we can always depend on it, and it all works brilliantly well. I can't tell you how many stories I've had from very well known household names where they couldn't continue production because of one item that was stuck in Wuhan, China, and they couldn't get it out, and it brought the whole facility and thousands of jobs to a halt as a result of it. So the word at the moment is around resilience, and in that resilience discussion, they are talking about agility of supply chains. They're talking about some onshoring, Nick. I wouldn't say there's a flood of onshoring going on. It's much more about bringing in risk and resilience into those procurement decisions and trying to get a sensible handle on what their supply chain looks like. There's also quite a few larger companies that don't really know their supply chain that well either, and you'll be surprised about the amount of work that's going on in the background to understand it. But digital has a key role to play here. One of the first sort of results of this, and we've been seeing this over the last 18 months or so, has been around security. So really around cyber security in particular. One manufacturer of automation devices for manufacturers, which is not Rockwell, I will hasten to add, recently did a really interesting study of 100,000 internet connected devices installed in 5,000 manufacturing facilities around the UK, and found that 95% of them were set to their default passwords. And so what you're seeing now is a lot of companies thinking about really not only encouraging, but mandating, to your point earlier, around cybersecurity, which is starting companies thinking about their digital footprint, how they're using some of those initial digital investments they've made and what they need to think about in terms of connecting their networks together to the OEMs. I do think the OEMs have got a very large role to play in terms of encouraging their supply chain to get on the journey. There's a little bit around security. There's now quite a big theme around resilience. And the other point, of course, which most of them talk about now, is around global competitiveness. And to be globally competitive, they need a lot more transparency in their supply chain. And that really does force the adoption of many of these digital technologies, because that's the business outcome that the large OEM needs in terms of these deployment. I would just point to one other thing, Nick, I think was really an important point, which we haven't quite touched on yet, which they all report all the time whenever we do the surveys or we do our group discussions, and that's around the skills agenda. And there's a real, at the moment, challenge in getting the right skills, particularly in the smaller companies, to be able to take full advantage of a lot of these new techniques and technologies and get the right business outcomes. And there's a combination of factors in the skills agenda. Part of it is around curriculums in universities and vocational training, keeping up with the scale of change in terms of deployment of digital technologies. That's important. A very well-known large manufacturer said to me, they take graduates out of universities and they're absolutely not work ready. They have to then spend quite a lot of time equipping them with digital skills for the type of environment that they use in their manufacturing environment. So we need to have a catch-up position there. And then we have other manufacturers. There's one very interesting manufacturer. It's a large engine producer in the UK that employs 1,000 engineers in their design and production engineering, and spent the last 3 years changing that to 40% going towards data analytics skills rather than production engineering skills, because they were collecting so much data from their engines in the field that they needed to be able to interpret that data, feed it back into the production cycle, improve their efficiency and competitiveness. And they couldn't find those skills people. That was really impossible. In fact, the chief executive said to me, we didn't even know how to write the job description in the company. So we had to work with our local university, start creating the right sort of job descriptions to put it in place. So I think underpinning a lot of this push is going to be a really clear skills agenda, not only for new people coming into the sector, Nick, but also for reskilling a lot of the workers that are there already, to equip them with some of these technologies, some of the basic digital skills they're going to need for the coming years. So it's quite a complicated, faceted approach, but some OEMs are really, some of the larger companies are really working hard on this agenda right now as a kind of fallout from the pandemic, because it falls under their resilience heading. So it's quite an interesting change in approach, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. We're going to move on. Actually, I was going to ask the question about skills, but I think you actually summed it up really brilliantly just there, Stephen. I want to move on from this question of supply chain, where I think we've sort of more or less understood that a connected supply chain not only adds and aids resilience, but also it makes business faster, smoother, and opens up new business opportunities for those involved. But I'd like to talk about the practicalities now. You know, people scratching their heads saying, well, this is all well and good, but how do I go about it? How much is it going to cost me? And so on and so forth. Sam, I'd like to turn to you again first, if I may, just to talk about where is the starting point? Where would you say to an SME who came to you, I want to get cracking on this? How do I do it? Do I have to eat the elephant all at once, or can I do it a hoof at a time?
Definitely bite-sized approach, absolutely. So, yeah, a common theme we've talked about today, you just start with the problems. So if someone's coming in and heard this and think, I need to become digitalized to connect to my supply chain, to win more business, prepare for the future, that's a great ambition. The starting point is then, well, what's the strategy within the business right now? What is it about? Are you prioritizing now productivity? Are you trying to reduce lead times? Are you trying to increase your value add? You know, through digitalization, maybe even servitization, offer additional service to customers. So be clear on what it is you're trying to deliver now within the business, and then looking at examples of where businesses have tried to do similar things and the suites of technologies available. Or organizations like ourselves, High Value Manufacturing Catapult. Certainly, if you're in the Northwest, you go and speak to Donna's team, who can give you some really good examples and practical support on this as well. And look at, you know, here are how the technologies that are available to you now can address the challenges you've got in front of you. And start relatively small with an addressable problem where you understand the return on investment, with support from those who can remove some of the barriers, access to skills, access to partners who are trusted, with whom you can deploy technology from, even finding access to finance if that's required, access to innovation funding if that's part of it, if it's slightly higher risk, adoption programs, again, through Made Smarter. So it's somebody who can be a trusted partner to help you interpret a business challenge and understand where to start with digital tools that would deliver that. We've mentioned a couple of times the digital backbones were really important, but it's probably not the starting point, because that can seem, it's not as obvious a return on investment straight away, and it can be quite scary to people. So I'd look at a discrete problem and then think about what's the backbone you've got to build to plug that into. You start to address additional problems and bring more in. So you can start to build the skill base within the company, as well as building that network of trusted partners, because it is about collaboration as well. So start relatively small, addressable problems. It's really quite tangible, practical, and you'll start to see quick benefits and returns.
Emmanuel, if I may come to you, forgive me for couching it this way, but you are a service provider, a technology service provider to manufacturers. And I think manufacturers sometimes get a little bit caught in the headlights. They've got messages coming from a lot of different providers. How do you cut through that? What do you say to a manufacturer who says, well, I don't know, if I go with you, what, you know, am I going to miss out on something else? You know, how do you reassure them?
So I guess if we discuss the business value, I guess, and we are not just a software vendor or a technology vendor, just look at my book and my catalog and pick what you want. I guess we change the approach, and I guess this is the way at least we want to behave. And the other very important aspect is that today the customer needs an element of companies to solve this business issue or their business issues. So the time of doing everything by yourself is over, and it's really the one who gather the ecosystem, who work as an ecosystem, that will succeed. So, and by the way, it's a bit my job in Europe to really make sure that we work as an ecosystem, and we combine pieces of technologies, of software, of hardware, security services, advisory services, and so on, to provide an answer to the customer. And it's complex, okay, because even in one company it's complex. So gathering ecosystem is even more complex. But when we are agile in the mindset, if we really focus on what the customer asks, it's really a winning combination. And what Mike was sharing with the combination of Rockwell, PTC, Microsoft, I can tell you that when the three of us come and meet a customer, we address end-to-end their issues. It's really insurance guarantee some of the customers that, okay, they understand my issue, they come as a combined forces and they can help. So this is what we're trying to do.
Mike, I imagine that you'd echo those sentiments, that you're able to reassure companies and at the same time offer them the assurance that there is a way forward for them a bit at a time, as Sam said.
Yeah, you know, the most successful companies I work with concentrate on their core business, and that core business tends to be manufacturing. It's not IT, it's not software, it's not technology. It's not a whole host of things. They concentrate on the core, but what they do is they partner very well to supplement that ecosystem to support that core manufacturing, and they take it as and when they will. So to what Sam said, you know, when they might need a bit of maybe R&D, they'll go and reach out to AMRC or one of the catapults to help them work on that little problem. Then they'll solve it. Then they will concentrate on producing and making money out of that. And as they need an IT partner or a digital partner, they'll reach out to ourselves and to PTC. And I think that's the core bit of it. We can't be all things to all people. We can't have a full IT department, a full R&D department. We need to reach out to people like Make UK to help us interact, get hold of funding from Manufacturing Made Smarter and other areas, link up with academia, link up with technology providers to solve that problem, and then get back to core. And the ecosystem is absolutely key to me, absolutely key. And I think if you look at most successful case studies, they've utilized ecosystem to their value rather than try and fight against it.
Well, Philippa, at CNC Robotics, you work not only with Made Smarter, but also, of course, you're very prominent in the Northwest region as a progressive SME. What's your view on this as you yourself look at adopting technologies, building out your particular digital backbone? What are the priorities that you're looking at?
Yeah, it's a good question, and just to follow up on the points before. So I think fundamentally people work with people, and yes, we're talking about technology, but this all starts and ends with people, and that it's about, you know, working with the right people to help you find the right solutions for your business. So, you know, don't underestimate the value of that network. And I suppose that's kind of how we've been able to get to the position that we're in as a company, is actually we really leverage our network and we work with the right people to help us identify, you know, what are the right opportunities for us as a business to enable us to continue to scale up and grow. And we are incredibly lucky in the Northwest that, you know, we've got very, very strong universities. We've got a very, very strong network of, you know, innovators and industrialists and business advisors who are there at the end of the phone to answer any simple question that you might have, or to help you unpick a complex problem. And, you know, I'm a massive supporter of Made Smarter and SciTech Daresbury. You know, there's a fantastic network of industrialists who are there who never not pick up the phone to me. And if I've got a challenge that I need to try and unpick and understand, you know, they're there to help us. And, you know, I think that's the piece for us, is that, you know, we often talk about, you know, what is the North about, and, you know, there was talk about the levelling up agenda, and we were in a meeting yesterday about levelling up with Make UK, and I think one of the things that we're really fortunate about in the Northwest is that we've got a fantastic network of solution providers, manufacturers, thought leaders, you know, that provide that peer-to-peer support, which has been fundamental to me as a leader, but also fundamental to the business, and has helped us to continue to drive that journey. And I suppose we're really lucky that we work with a lot of SMEs who will always open their door and show their robotic systems and talk about their journey that they've been on. And we often take, you know, prospective clients or people who are thinking about going on the journey to those manufacturers to help show that real life case study and talk about, the warts and all, because it isn't straightforward. None of this is straightforward. You start on a path and you learn as you go. So we have to work together as a network and with our peers.
I must say that the Northwest, every time I look at what's going on up there, with all the various pieces and institutions and people that you mentioned and the companies, it really is a showcase for how manufacturing fits into the wider ecosystem. And I know it's other regions do very well as well, but the Northwest is a shining example. Talking of the Northwest, Donna, the pilot. What happens when somebody wants to get involved? How does somebody in an SME manufacturing company who wants to embark on this journey, how do they work with Made Smarter? What's the first step?
The first step is that they usually contact us through the website, Made Smarter UK. And then from that point, they get allocated an advisor to work with them to start to understand what the issues are in their business. And then there's a range of support within the programme that we can provide them with. So there's leadership management programme. We've got student placements working with the sort of Northwest universities. So part of the problem is leaders don't know what they don't know, or they're scared to admit that they don't know. So how can we provide some skills support to help them identify potential areas they could adopt digitisation to help their business grow? And the difference with us is that we're obviously agnostic in terms of suppliers and providers of that support. But we've now got companies and suppliers who've engaged that do find access to sites. Philippa and the team at CNC Robotics have held events on their site for us to help people understand how they could use robotics to improve what they do as well. So there is now a network of peer support and mentoring for people as well. So it's that wraparound, and it's a support that's there whenever you need it. It's not limited to a number of hours, which a lot of business support programs can be. So this really was about identifying what worked. So we've been quite flexible about that in the pilot to work out what does work and what doesn't. But if people contact us through the website, if they're in the Northwest, obviously we're hopeful, as Stephen says, that we can get this rolled out nationally within England. So fingers crossed for that. But at the moment, you do have to be Northwest based.
Okay, assuming that the national model, which fingers crossed will roll out, the nitty gritty, somebody says, well, how much is this going to cost me? And you've then got to come up with an answer. What do you say to them?
All the advice and support around identifying what you might want to do is free, so you don't pay for that. And obviously there's a time element to it, but actually in terms of the projects that are worked up, we will make a contribution up to a maximum of £20,000 to a project to help you get on that journey and build confidence that you will get the return on investment that you're looking for. The student placements are funded as part of the pilot, and there's a £2,500 contribution to the leadership and management programme.
Well, that does sound like it's too good to be true, and I do hope that your door continues to be beaten loudly on, and a path beaten to it. Stephen, we already mentioned the potential for a national rollout, but we're approaching the end of the webinar. I wonder if we could sort of just try and sum up some of this in terms of the importance to UK manufacturing, that really, we're not talking about a nice to have solution for manufacturers. Increasingly, it's a must have.
Yes, it is indeed. And it's going to be driven by these trends we spoke about before, this acceleration on resilience, competitiveness, the desire to, through the refresh of the industrial strategy, to improve things like productivity, even though manufacturing is by far in the lead on productivity, but that's a whole other debate there. There's a whole host of reasons why we need to move it forwards. The challenge though here, and this is a challenge that certainly Donna and I are very familiar with, is that, it's getting to those manufacturers. There are 300,000 manufacturers in the UK. I mean, to Philippa's point, Make UK's membership's around 25,000 manufacturers. It's not anywhere near the scale we need to be able to touch so many companies. And in the pilot, we're touching a couple of thousand in terms of inquiries, to get to a national rollout is a really big stretch, just to make sure that people are aware of all the advantages and the contribution this can make to their strategy and their business outcomes. So we shouldn't underestimate the task, Nick. It's a big task. That's why it needs government backing as well, because it needs to be a national program. We need to get on it quickly. We have a role to play. We hold lots of groups around the country. We're doing collaborative seminars, we're doing all webinars like this, all kinds of things to try to get the message out around digitization. We also act as a kind of sounding board when people want to know where to go and contact people. So there's another avenue. But by far the most powerful thing I've seen, I think, is local collaboration in these clusters. There's nothing more powerful for an SME to go to his mate down the road and see his newly installed robot and understand exactly what that's done to his business. It's worth 10 times what we can do trying to convince them from the outside, because they can see and visualize, and they can absolutely understand how that can contribute to their business in the future. So encouraging this on a collaborative basis is critical. But on a macro level, absolutely vital for the UK, absolutely vital for our competitiveness going forwards, and absolutely vital to ensure that we can rebound from shocks like this. Someone described it to me as not a black swan event, the COVID-19 event, but probably the grey rhino event. You know, this very large thing in the distance, and we know it's going to have a big effect, not quite sure what it is yet. And we're sort of going to wait for the effects of this, I think, over the next 18 months, 2 years. And that's going to drive, again, another big driver towards how we adopt these kinds of technologies for the future.
Yes, I think as the rhino is visible in the distance, I think that rather than just staring there in the headlights, caught in the headlights, it does make sense to actually prepare for when it actually arrives. Yeah. I'd like to offer each of you now the opportunity to sort of impart a few final words of wisdom on this subject from your own particular viewpoint. Mike Loughran, can I start with you at Rockwell Automation, Make UK's partner in this webinar? What are your final thoughts, if you'd like to offer them?
Yeah, I think it's never been more accessible to go on the transformational journey, and never have we needed it more than we have now. I would just encourage people to be less cynical. I think it's probably a bit of a UK trait. Be less cynical, be a bit more open-minded, but reach out and do work in those clusters and partnerships locally. And, you know, partner for success is what I would say. And do please utilize all those great things that Make UK offer, that Made Smarter offer, that there is R&D budget to be had. But again, reach out for it, partner. That's all I'd say.
I was muted. I knew I was going to. I knew I was going to do that at some stage. I thought I'd have a clean sheet on this one. Emmanuel at PTC, we have discussed how you work with AMRC to showcase a lot of these brilliant IoT technologies. But what are your final thoughts as we consider what the title of this webinar is, which is a new manufacturing system building a fully digital operation?
Yeah, I would like to wrap up with people, because at the end it's all about people. And we see with digital transformation, we need to bring some of things which are natural for the digital natives. We need to bridge this expertise with more experienced people. So maybe the baby boomers, maybe the Gen X generation. So the recommendation we have is try to be as diverse as you can, even in small and medium business. Try to bridge these very experimented people, other people with this millennials generation, because you will bridge the expertise. We even see companies, so I will take the example of Barat Forge, so obviously a big company in heavy metal industry. They do make a mandatory training for any employee on digital transformation, 2 weeks training. So any employee, whatever you are on the shop floor, in finance, you do a 2 weeks training on digital transformation. There is a huge need to make people aware, to educate people. So yeah, try to find any way, combine people, being more diverse. If you can invest in trainings, go to AMRC, do whatever you can to raise the awareness.
Thank you. And Philippa, what about yourself as an SME? What are your final thoughts on this that you'd like to share with people watching?
Yeah, so I would say that, it can feel lonely sometimes when you're in business, and sometimes it can feel like you've got an uphill struggle that is really difficult to deal with, but there's absolutely help and support out there. So find a trade association that's relevant for you, network, get to know your peers, and get to know those trusted advisors that absolutely will help you kind of on that journey. And if you don't know who they are, just ask. There's a number of people on this call today who represent some of that network, and then just keep it really simple. It isn't as complicated as you think it is. Yes, it does sound like it needs to have a grand strategic plan. It really, really doesn't. Keep it simple, keep it sweet, and find the right people who can help you navigate that innovation landscape and enable your business to thrive.
Thank you, Sam. I suspect, as Philippa suggests, it's knowing that you want to start your journey is rather vital to actually getting on it in the first place.
Yes, that's step number one, I think. And I think that the timing, well, it's been an incredibly difficult time, of course, for everyone over the last year. As you say, with the grey rhino, we're not quite sure how things will unfold in the next 18 months to 2 years, but it feels to me that the timing is good, because once we start from a low base where we started out today, actually, there's an opportunity to bridge that gap. We've still got an incredibly competitive, excellent UK engineering manufacturing community. There is this appetite for increased resilience, which I think will create new opportunities. It won't all become delivered straight to us, but the opportunities for new business to be won. And we're actually seeing the necessity, perhaps the more obvious starting points becoming evident, perhaps, when you look at how do we improve productivity, how do we deal with constraints related to COVID, supply chain resilience concerns, or needing to just reprofile, having greater responsiveness, and moving into new market opportunities. So greater visibility of data in your business. We've heard examples of how that gives you greater confidence, perhaps, to go and win new business, improve productivity. And there's the Made Smarter program through support through Make UK, through HVM Catapult. There's a lot of support out there now, the partners that are needed to remove the barriers that were there initially. So start with that sense of exactly what it is we're trying to solve, which is your starting point. There's all the support there now to go and take those steps. And there's better examples. I think we're going to see a cascade as we get more examples of businesses like Philippa's and other, and SMEs taking those first steps. It's easier for others to follow and share those experiences.
Thank you, Sam. Donna, final word from you.
I would echo a lot of those comments, but I think the bit we do find is that you don't know what you don't know, and there isn't really a stupid question. So I would echo Philippa on that, is just ask somebody or engage with a network that might be able to point you in the right direction. And even though if you're not in the Northwest, you can't access the pilot, look at the website. There's a range of case studies across a range of sectors that people that have started on their journey, and some of the lessons and some of the benefits that they've now seen for doing that. So just take that step, you'll be surprised.
I'm a journalist. Never say there's no such thing as a stupid question. We ask them all the time. If I can offer Stephen Phipson the final word on this, please, from the perspective of Make UK, your thoughts.
Just very briefly, really, Nick. Obviously, many businesses, particularly the SME community, have been through a very, very tough time this year. In fact, many of them talk to us about being in survival mode, and we completely understand that. But this is such a critical agenda. I say this to all the smaller companies I come across that ask the question about the digital journey. Number one, be curious, ask questions. Absolutely important that they're curious about it. Start small. Start with a very small scale program that's focused on one particular business outcome. Be amazed by the results from that, and then help us go and take that message to other companies around you so that we can get that adoption really snowballing over the country over the next 12 years. 12 months, not 12 years. I should say 12 months.
12 years will do as well.
Yeah, it would do. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, all of you, thank you very much indeed for being on this webinar. I think it's been terrific. A lot of juice in there for all those watching. I'd like to thank Mike Loughran, who's CTO, UK and Ireland of Rockwell Automation. Emmanuel Camus, thank you very much indeed, Senior Vice President, Strategic Alliances, EMEAI at PTC. Sam Turner, Chief Technology Officer at the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. Many thanks to you. Philippa Glover, Managing Director, CNC Robotics. Many thanks. Donna Edwards, Managing Director of the Growth Company, Made Smarter, of course, Northwest Pilot, and Stephen Phipson, Chief Executive of Make UK. Thank you all for being with us today. We really appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed it. And from all of us, goodbye.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Cheers, Nick. Bye now. Bye now.
Thank you.